All right, welcome everyone. My name is Sarabjeet. You guys are joining me in either the Business Analyst and Scrum Master in Demand Facebook group or YouTube channel. I'm your host and own the both of those platforms. And my goal and objective of managing those platforms is to help as many of you guys in transitioning into these roles. I have about 15 to 20 years of experience in this domain. I absolutely love it. It's like the best thing for me to help you guys transition. So I've asked, you guys, what it is that you guys wanted to talk about this weekend, and most of you guys responded with interview questions. Now, I do like to have these sessions interactive, and that's why I do live and have a Zoom call for you guys to come on and ask questions for things that don't make sense. So please be interactive with me, ask me any questions you may have, and I'll try my best to answer them. The format of this session today is there's lots of videos out there on how you should answer questions, or like what you should say for the particular business analyst and or Scrum Master interview questions that come up most commonly. My approach is a little bit different because I understand that your experience is going to be different from my experience. So it's really unfair for me to tell you exactly what to say in those interviews. What I'm going to share with you is the format on how you can best answer those interview questions based on your experience and your background. Okay, so what I prepared for you are some interview questions based on, there's many that may be asked for today. I've prepared a response to 4 of the most common interview questions that are asked during interview sessions. And I'll cover the format with you. If there are others, we can have another session next week or the following week to talk about them. The other thing is I'm always looking for topics to talk about with you guys. So if you have things that you'd like me to discuss or train on, please let me know. And I plan on doing more of these live sessions as we go forward. So with that, I do have prepared a PowerPoint presentation for you guys, just so you guys can take away and apply this format in your upcoming interviews and let me know how successful you have been. All right, so with that, we'll get started. All right, so again, if you have questions, please unmute yourself. If you don't have any questions at the moment, I'm going to mute you for now, just while we go through the format. If you have any questions, please unmute yourself. And if you don't have any questions, mute yourself so we can reduce the disturbance for everyone. So here we are. We are either watching this in the Business Analyst and Scrum Master in Demand YouTube channel or Facebook group. And what I want to say to you guys is, hold on one second. Put this in presentation mode. So what I want to say to you guys is, before going for the interview, lots of you guys are very, very nervous, right? I do lots of mock interviews in my own training program for my candidates, and I can see even those that I'm working with and I'm training, they're very, very nervous in going through interviews, right? And what I want you to know, one of the most key things and what makes these roles very, very unique and amazing to be in is that most of your skill set is very transferable, which means that if you have working experience with with teams of people, you will find that most of the situations that you'll be in as a business analyst are the same ones that you would be in as a business analyst or a Scrum Master. So I'll give you an analogy here. So even if you have worked as a developer or a QA or somebody in the banking area, right? Those are the most common people that come to my coaching program that want to transfer as a business analyst. And most of the skill sets are transferable, right? So for example, if you have worked with a developer or as a QA, quality assurance analyst, what do you do in your day-to-day job, right? You work with many different teams, right? You understand what you need to do as a team member and you execute, right? Similar approach for business analysts. So I want you to feel a little bit comfortable going into these interviews and not being so scared about those situational questions, right? Even if you have worked, at the bank or, in healthcare at a hospital, you are already working in an environment where you're working with many, many different team members, right? And trying to analyze and figure out a path forward on any situation that you've been in. So I want you to think back in your experience on how you've handled certain situations and apply those for these interviews, because that really will help you move forward. It's really unfair for me to like teach you exactly what to say, right? Because your experience is different than mine, and it's really something that you need to put a path forward on, based on your past experiences. So knowing that most of your background is transferable skills for these roles, you should feel a little bit at ease at creating and talking about your background and stories that you have gone through. The other thing is you need to take a deep breath in and deep breath out. Being comfortable in some of these interview sessions is the best that you can do, right? If you're nervous and you're fumbling through words, that's really not a good sign at interviews, right? As I interview many, many people throughout the day, just somebody who is gonna talk comfortably, will put even the interviewer at ease. So if you're fumbling through words and you're nervous, you're actually putting your interviewer at a difficult and uncomfortable position. So just breathe in, breathe out, take a deep breath, and move forward with your answers. And be comfortable with your answers. That's, again, most of the background that you already have are things that business analysts and or Scrum Master would face on their day-to-day situation anyway. So be comfortable with your answers, and all companies do things a little bit differently anyway. So it's okay, if you answer your question in a certain way. Recording in progress. And then the other item is to have a conversation, right? If you're comfortable and confident in your answers, interviewing is nothing more than having a conversation with your interviewer about your past experience, and that's all it is, right? All they can do is take your past experience and see if it will be a good fit for their organization, right? So just again, be comfortable, have a conversation, and then storytelling helps a little bit, right? So when you go into your answers, provide a little bit more context around that situation will definitely help your interviewer. And then the format of how you answer these questions matter. And so that's what I'm going to cover with you guys today. So far, are there any questions before I move forward? All right. So the first question that you're going to have is, tell me about yourself, right? This is the most common question that all, whether you're interviewing for business analyst positions or not, this is the most common question that comes up. And I'll tell you why. It's most probably because your interviewer hasn't had time to look at your resume up until they're interviewing you, which is the most common reason why this question comes up a lot. And you have to understand your interviewers are either hiring managers or people that are extremely busy. So even though, when they say, tell me about yourself, is probably the first time they're looking through your resume to understand, what type of questions they can ask you. Right. So this is your opportunity to put your best foot forward in telling them, like, who are you? Like, why should they hire you for this position? And this is a format that I use in my interviews and, have done really well. So here's a format. When they say, tell me about yourself, you're going to state your name. You're going to state the number of years of experience you have as a business analyst and or Scrum Master. You're going to tell them your educational background, and you're going to list the companies you worked for older first. So these are going to be the companies that you have listed on your resume towards the bottom of your resume, and then you're going to move to the most recent, right? So let's say in my resume, Citigroup is the first company that I worked with when I came out of college. So after I tell them my educational background, I will say I started working at MetLife as a junior business analyst, and then I will move my way up based on the companies I have listed on my resume to the most recent one, which is where I am today, right? And then you're going to say the last bullet says, currently I'm working for, you're going to say the name of the company, managing, working on the name of the project to provide X results. So this, tell me about yourself answer needs to be less under 2 minutes, right? Oftentimes I hear lots of people just going into so much detail about what they're working on right now and the types of projects that really is not necessary, because this question is to understand like who are you as a person versus all the experiences you have. So they're just trying to assess in a minute, 2 minute, 3 minute max, who are you as a person? So this is the format to answer this question. The next question that generally you will get is, help me understand what you're doing at. So this will be particularly about a project. Most of the time, it's going to be your most recent position that you're at, or the second most recent position, or it could be a position where it's the same domain that you're interviewing for. So let's, for example, say on my resume, right now I'm at a healthcare domain. Before that, I was working on a federal project, but my third project down is in healthcare, but like at the hospital systems, right? So let's say if I'm now interviewing for a hospital, system application, they may want to know specifically about my third job experience versus my most recent one. So make sure, like, the stories that you prepare, or as you're preparing for your resume, and the positions and the domain that you're going into, focus on the job profiles that are related to that domain, because that's what they probably most want to talk to you about. Okay, so again, they will say, help me understand what you're doing at X. Most of the time, it's your most recent position where you are currently, but there are situations where they want to go back and talk about, a past work experience, only because it's of a similar domain. Okay, so again, the format of answering this question is like, sure, my role as a business analyst and or Scrum Master, we're working on, here's where you need to insert a high level objective of the project that you're working on to enhance or create software for. Now, here's where you're going to list your stakeholders, right? So how would I answer this for myself? Like, sure, as my role of a program manager, we are working on providing Medicare services to make the intake service for our providers in the state of California, right? And then you talk about the major milestones on the project that either have been completed, either you're working on, or are planned to happen next. So then you go through a process. So for example, if it's a waterfall scenario you're doing, or you're working as a business analyst, you would identify the major milestones for a business analyst. If you're working as a Scrum Master, then you would identify the major milestones of a Scrum Master. And as an example, if you are working as a business analyst, some of your major milestones are, working with your stakeholders to identify requirements, getting sign off on your BRD, completing the design sessions, UAT, and etc. And if you're working on the agile environment, some of your major milestones are, having a backlog, prioritizing the product backlog, sprint planning, backlog grooming sessions. So again, based on what environment that you're working in, when they say, help me understand what you're doing on a particular project, this is a format that you should follow based on what role it is that you're interviewing for. So any questions with this one? All right. The next most common question that we get is, how do you handle conflict, right? And again, here's a format that I usually follow for myself and is one that I'm recommending for you. When they ask you this question, you first want to state the problem and the situation, right? So when they say, how do you handle conflict? You're going to tell them, go back and think about a situation where, either your stakeholders didn't agree on something, or your project faced a certain situation where it was difficult for them to move forward, right? So you're going to talk about on X project. So look at your resume, think about a situation or a project that you would have not been able to handle, or it was out of the blue. So you're going to say on project X at MetLife, or on project why for whatever company you worked for, we faced a situation where, now here's where you're going to state the situation very confidently, right? This made it difficult for the project team because now you're going to talk about, I'm hearing a little bit of disturbance. I'm going to put you on mute until I'm done with this slide, and then I'll ask you guys for questions. So on Project X, we face a situation where here's where your one sentence summary of the situation goes. This made it difficult for the project team because now you're going to talk about how this impacted the project negatively, right? We overcame this situation by what did you do to solve this problem? You're going to talk about, I first did this, I then did this, and then the last thing that we did as a team or you as a business analyst or Scrum Master was why. You don't have to list 3 actions. If there were 3 things that you had to do to resolve an issue, then I would talk about them in that format. But if there were just 2 things, then talk about I first did this and then I did this to solve this problem. And then the last thing you're going to talk about is we as a project team learned from this. So what was the learning and what was the lesson learned from this situation? So for example, if you're working on a situation where it's a conflict between 2 people, how did you solve that conflict? And some of you guys may say that we've never been in a situation like that. Well, if you're married or you have a significant other, how did you, I'm sure you've gotten into a fight or an argument of some sort, right? Like there's no, think back in your life and, even when you were in college or when you were, doing anything in your life, I'm sure there's been a conflict in your life that you had to resolve. Think back on how you resolve that conflict, right? And then, come up with an action plan on how you would have done that at work, right? So it doesn't necessarily have to be an example from a job-related experience. It could be an example on how you handle conflict, because what they're trying to judge here is like, how do you, are you the type of person that if you see conflict, that you're going to just let it fester? Or are you the type of person, if you see conflict on your project, are you going to try to resolve it? What action steps are you going to take to resolve that conflict? And how are you going to move forward from it? Does that make sense, you guys? All right, I'll pause there for questions. And I see some items, some questions in the chat. The question is, what is the response for entry-level JD for introduction and project experience? And then will the PowerPoint and the recorded be shared? So the PowerPoint and this session is recorded in our Facebook group. I'll also load it onto our YouTube channel, so it's available to you guys. The question is, how do you do this for entry-level positions? As I said, most of these questions don't have to be related to your actual work experience. If you're going in as an entry level and you have no business analyst experience, and you're going in as a junior BA or first-time BA, they're not expecting you to have relevant BA experience. Now, if you want to, go into the market, with having some business analyst experience, I would highly recommend that you get some opportunity to volunteer and work as a business analyst and or take training courses which give you the hands-on experience where you can build that experience, right? And build that knowledge for you to do well in those interviews. And another question is, if we're working on internal projects, what will be the kind of challenges that we face with stakeholders? I can't create what type of challenges you would face on your projects. I think that's something that you have to look through your experience and your background and identify conflicts, right? There's lots of business analysts that work with internal teams. There's lots of teams that work with one another. So you'll have to go and look in your background to identify what those conflicts are to be able to talk about them in the interview. From your experience, what are the kind of challenges you face? I'm not comfortable sharing that with you because that would be unfair. You'll have to identify your past experiences and talk about those in your interviews. Okay, the next question is, how would you work with a difficult stakeholder? Again, this is a similar situation, right? Just because difficult stakeholders. First, I'd like to say is stakeholders and your business owners or your business customers are people as well, right? And so think back in a situation where you had to work with difficult people in your life, right? Stakeholders are no different. You may have had somebody, even on your project team that, just is difficult to work with, or you may have a situation when you were in school or college where you had like a difficult professor, or you may have, a friend in a group that may be difficult to like get along with. So again, go back into your life and think about situations where you had to deal with a difficult person or personality, and identify how did you come across that situation. Again, most of these questions are geared towards understanding how would you handle that situation as a personality, right? Because there are going to be lots of different people that you're working with as a business analyst, and so they're trying to understand how would you manage those personalities. Hearing. So how are you going to handle these situations? Are you going to be the one to give in and do everything this difficult personality wants you to do? Or are you going to try to take steps towards working either with this person, or how are you going to make sure that this doesn't impact your project? And so again, think back to your work experience or your personal experiences and think about how did you overcome working with a difficult stakeholder? And this is how I would format this question. So you would first state the scenario, right? The situation or anything that comes to your mind that would fit into this scenario. On project X, I had to work with, you would then now insert in, the department or the group of people that you had to work with that seemed difficult in nature. Explain why they were difficult to work with, right? And as I said before, they're just people, right? Most of the time when people are, difficult to work with, they're just passionate about the project. They, want a certain way because it impacts their day-to-day activities. So those are some of the reasons why they may seem difficult to work with, right? And what steps did you take to gain victory or to overcome that situation? So I would talk about, what did you do, right? Did you try to listen to what their problems or concerns were? Did you, how did you resolve those conflicts with those people? Did you try to understand? Did you try to model? Did you, try to meet with them when they had time available? So there's many different things that, you would have done in your personal lives to figure out how to work with difficult people. So I would list what steps those were in the given situation that you decide to talk about. And then what as a project team did we learn from here, right? So if the issue was that you were not able to meet with these people, for example, what steps did you take to resolve this from, facing your problem or any other project going forward? So those are the lessons learned that you want to talk about. Okay. And I think that those are all the ones that I prepared, questions and format on how to answer these questions. Any questions that you guys may have for me? Let me go back and look in the chat to see if I missed any questions. Okay, any questions you guys have for me? Was this helpful? Was understanding the format on how you should be answering these questions helpful to you guys? Yes, no, you're all on mute right now.
Yes, thank you.
Understood.
Yeah, okay. Are there any other interview questions that you guys want me to talk about or give you the format for?
When you asked about what kind of a level of salary you prefer, but you don't know, for example, the market.
Yeah.
And what we can to answer.
So generally, I don't throw out numbers at all unless I generally say, I'm expecting whatever is, the average based on my number of years of experience, right? So market level. Generally, if you're in, I don't know too much about the UK salary levels, but in the US for business analyst and or Scrum Master, we're looking at like lower level starting from 70 to like 110, 120K a year, right? But do some research in your market and understand like what the baseline is or what the median is. But generally for recruiters or when I'm going in for interviews and they ask me for numbers, I don't throw out numbers because I want them to give me the first number out there. And generally, if they're pushing me too much, I look at what I'm making right now and I would increase it by 5 to 10K and say, this is, what my expectation is. Because why would I change my job to make the same amount of money I'm making today? It just doesn't make any sense. So if I'm going to change a job or position for whatever reason, even if I hate it there, it has to be because I'm going to make a little bit more than I'm making today.
Yeah, thank you.
Mm-hmm. All right. What other questions? So the question is, how should someone with a gap in experience answer these questions given things have changed in the past few years? So these questions are not, so the way that you manage, you work as a business analyst or a Scrum Master, right? You guys understand that we follow the SDLC, the software development lifecycle. That's a platform or an approach to how we manage IT projects that has not changed, right? So even if you have a gap in your experience, the answers to these questions do not change, right? Because we're following a format that's been created for us in how do we manage IT projects, right? The projects themselves may be different, but the format and how we approach projects will always be the same, right? Unless we come up with some new methodology. And in my 15 years or 20 years, what we've done is gone from waterfall to agile. That's been the newest thing. But your answers, because you have a gap, should not be different. The other question is for a beginner as a BA, what should he be learning about APIs? I get this question a lot, and I don't know why this APIs are such a big deal. So there is a video that I did on, intro to APIs, right? And a little bit more detail. I actually brought in developers to help you understand, how do you work with APIs? APIs are nothing more than working with third parties, either systems or services that make your project a little bit easier to manage, right? So if you know that you need an API on the project, you as a business analyst and or Scrum Master don't need to figure out all the details. That's what your that's what your developers and your business systems analysts are there for, right? It's not something like APIs and how to connect with them and what information you need, that you will connect your developers with either the company or the service that is providing the API, and they will figure out the technical details for that. But as a business analyst and or Scrum Master, you just don't need to be too involved in the technical details of that. I hope that answers your question. I forget who answered that question. Let me know if that answered your question, okay? The next question is, what is the role of business analysts in using Salesforce? I've had a lot of interviews where these questions are being asked. So this question is from Anita. Do you have Salesforce experience? So if you're going for interviews that are for business analysts, okay. So if you don't have Salesforce experience, right, and they're asking you like, what is the role of a business analyst in using Salesforce? Generally, for those who are certified for Salesforce, for the admin license or certifications, they have, some high level understanding of what Salesforce is. So what does a Salesforce BA do is what they work with their stakeholders to identify how to change or modify things in the Salesforce platform, right? So a traditional business analyst would work on, for example, like enhancing a system, right? Or building a new system. A Salesforce analyst would work on making modifications to the instance of Salesforce that your company or your client has purchased. So your primary focus is going to be on Salesforce, and that's why it helps to either be certified or have experience in Salesforce, so you know how to work with your stakeholders to gather those requirements and then work with developers to implement. Does that help, Anita? Okay. Another question is, could you elaborate about user stories? I've done a few videos on user stories on my YouTube channel already. Please watch those. And if you still have questions, post them in our group, and I'm more than happy to elaborate on user stories. The other question is, to become a project manager, how long do we need to survive as a BA? So I've done this transition myself. I will give you my experience, right? Because that's all I have to base this answer on. So I started as a junior business analyst, then business analyst, project lead, project manager. Now I'm doing program management. For me, I felt like 5 years was good enough for me so I could have a deep and true understanding of how to manage projects from a BA standpoint. And then I was able to transition into project management, which is what I recommend to everybody, maybe if not 5 years, like what I did, at least 2 years, because you really want to have that firm grasp of like the inner workings of documenting and working with stakeholders on those requirements before you can sit on top of everything and manage the project end to end. So that would be my recommendation. Would you recommend CSPO or CSM certification for a beginner BA? What I recommend you guys, for those who have no experience as a business analyst at all, is to try to get some domain experience, right? So if you're trying to transition into a BA role, let's say in the healthcare domain, go work at a hospital, go volunteer and work at a hospital. If you're trying to transition as a business analyst in the banking domain, go work as a teller, go find a job at a bank. Because in transitioning into a business analyst, there's two skill sets that are needed, right? One, that is a domain knowledge, right? Which is, if you're going for healthcare, working at a hospital will help. If you're going for banking, working at a bank would help you understand how does this, this business in general work, right? Once you have that experience, I would then try to find a coach or a mentor or training platform that gives you hands-on experience. So once you have the domain knowledge and you understand how a business analyst works, would be your best approach in hitting or breaking into this role, is my recommendation. So would I recommend that you take certifications without having, understanding what a business analyst does or having domain knowledge? No, because it doesn't really help. You can't really take exams and show up for interviews and expect to get a job. Does it work for some people? Yeah, but for majority of the time, like if you're just, throwing out buzzwords at them that you learned during the certification, it's really not going to help you guys, unfortunately. And I actually should say fortunately, because being in this industry and working on these systems, like you do need some level of experience to be successful, right? So can you tell me how we can answer questions on why should we hire you? So I'll tell you what I say. Like when they say, why should we hire you? I'm like, why wouldn't you hire me? I have a great background. I meet the skill sets that you require for this position. I'm hardworking. I'm a quick learner. I'm a team player. I have all the qualities that you need for somebody to be successful in this role, right? So interviewing is not always just like question, answer. I always try to like throw some fun into it. I joke around a little bit at the beginning, right? So make it, like I said, make it a conversation, make it fun for them, because when you're nervous and you're just giving them like straight answers, you're actually putting them you're making them a little bit nervous too, right? So make it a little bit fun. So the last question that I'll take is for product owner, and then there's one more that came through and a few more. So last 3 questions I'll take for today. And then again, I'm more than willing to have more of these discussions. Just post in the group what you guys like me to talk about, and we can have more and more of these. The next question is for product owner. Again, it doesn't matter which certification you go for, honestly, for Scrum Master or product owner. All they care is if you have the experience, right? That's the biggest thing that they care about is, do you have the experience to do this job? Because these positions are very, very involved, right? So your experience matters, right? The way that you conduct yourself in the interview matters. And then if you have some sort of a certification, whether it's PSM or CSPO, those things hardly matter, you guys, because they're not going to say like, how did you score on that exam? They don't care, right? Just having a certification shows that you went the extra mile and you're certified. That's all, right? But again, in terms of prioritization, your experience matters, how you conduct yourself in the interview, and if you have some sort of certification, it hardly matters which ones you go for. Do you coach people for interview? If yes, what's the process? I generally, in my own private coaching program, I do help people transition into business analyst and Scrum Master roles. So interviewing and resume prep is part of my package. I generally don't like to work with people that are not in my program just because I don't know if they actually have the experience or not, right? So in my program, we work on a real IT project, which gives them the experience that they need. So I'm able to help, coach them and prepare them for these interviews. So if you do actually have BA or Scrum Master experience, reach out to me and we can work together. But if you have no experience, then just helping you with the interview process is really difficult because then I'm teaching you everything, right? So that's generally how I work in my private coaching program, where we work on an IT project and then I teach you how to interview. That works really, really well. So that's what I prefer to do. If you actually do have experience and you just are nervous about interviewing and need some guidance and coaching, reach out to me and I'm happy to help. So that's how I like to approach that. The second to last question that I have is, how will they shortlist our CV based on, so they're not shortlisting your CV based on certifications at all. Certifications, even for me, I manage a $64 million project. And when I'm looking at resumes, I'm not going to invite somebody in for an interview just because they have a certification versus somebody who doesn't have a certification. Again, what matters the most is your experience, how you conduct yourself, and then certifications are like the bottom of my list. How many projects can we expect to work on as part of the course? I only work on one project with you because that's like I said before, I'm teaching you a process and an approach. If there's more projects, it makes it longer and difficult. But, as long as you have the inside view of how do you manage a project from a business analyst, Scrum Master experience, and then you're able to articulate that really well is what, moves the needle in my opinion. But we work on one IT project together and I help you based on that one. Okay. I'm not going to say any more questions because I said I'm not going to answer any more questions. But I hope this was helpful for you guys. The materials will be in our Facebook group and I'll be loading this video on YouTube as well. I'm always looking for topics to do these sessions, so let me know what topics you'd like me to talk about. And if they're, if it's the topics that majority of you guys want to talk about, I'm happy to talk about them. But yeah, use me, you guys. I've got so much experience and sometimes I just don't know what to talk about because it's all here. So if you give me topics, I'm more than happy to talk about them. All right. Thank you, everyone. Thank you so much for this session. I do like this interactive sessions because, again, it helps me talk about stuff that's in here. I do like this interactive approach. Thank you again. I'll see you guys next weekend or the weekend after. Bye. Bye,
Thank
everyone.
you a lot.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye-bye.